I'm big on conferences because they've changed my life. There are two in particular that I'd say changed the trajectory of my life.
Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Huntley Leadership Podcast. I'm your host today, Ron Huntley. It's great to have you with us. If you're here for the first time, a special welcome to you. And if you're coming back, then welcome back. I want to talk to you today about conferences. What role do they play in renewal anyway? We're going to dive deep into that. And actually, there's going to be a link below that's going to give you must-attend conferences. You're going to want to check out that list. So click the link below for that. I'm really excited to have Rebuilt author, co-author, and the head of Rebuilt Organization Ministry that does coaching and really leans into leadership and parish renewal, Tom Corcoran. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Ron. You look sharp today, by the way. You're dressed, you got the coat. I'm feeling a little underdressed just being with you, but good to be with you.
Still as handsome as ever, though. That's the important thing, Tom.
Yes. See, yeah.
I often tell people one of the books that impacted my leadership and my passion was the book Rebuilt, the one that you and Michael originally wrote. And I was literally laughing out loud while I'm reading the book because it was so refreshing and honest and fun. And you're poking fun at yourselves and just really saying, what are we doing anyway? And what are we called to do? And I think those are important questions. And then that has led to a conference, and that conference has led to a coaching stream. And there's just so much that has come out of your guys' earnest desire to make a difference as a Catholic parish. And first of all, I want to thank you for that. And then I want to talk about with you maybe what role did conferences play in your life as you are kind of on this journey of,
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I mean, I'm big on conferences because they've changed my life. There are two in particular that I'd say changed the trajectory of my life. The first one we talk about in Rebuilt, and that was, I'd read Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry by Doug Fields, started implementing some of that model into the way I was doing youth ministry and activity. Excuse me. And eventually, Father Michael kind of was interested in what I was doing, and I would present some things at parish council meetings, and it's like, that's good stuff. And so, eventually I got an email to go to a youth, purpose-driven youth ministry conference out at Saddleback. And I forwarded that to Father Michael. I'm like, do you want to go to this? And he said, yeah, let's go. And we went out there, and, we talk about this in Rebuilt, that going to that conference was very nerve-wracking for us. It was way, way, way out of our comfort zone. We talk about, stepping on the campus of Saddleback was like stepping on a different planet. We at one point, Saddleback is huge, and we stepped on the campus, and we went to what a building we thought was the church. Turned out to be the kids' building, right? That's how big. And then, we go into the regular church, and we call it, a Walmart with chairs. It looked totally different, but the biz experience we had is, so you're looking around like, how did this happen, right? You're just naturally asking questions, and it's intimidating, but you're like, this happened somehow, right? What do they know that we don't? And then we talk about just being so warmly welcomed when we went in that, Father Michael talks about that, like being so warmly welcomed. We walked out a side door to see if it would happen again, and it did. And again, just the idea of like, I don't remember, I guess, at that conference so much any of the content. Well, I remember some of it, but I just remember that experience and being like, there is something here we don't know and something we can learn. And that started us on a trajectory of, we went to Saddleback for many different conferences, but also checking out some other evangelical churches and just seeing, okay, what is going on, and picking up common themes. That was one of the conferences. The second conference that changed my life if I'm not taking up the food. It's okay to keep going here.
No, please. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Was the Drive Conference in '06. This was at North Point Church. And this is a few years after that Saddleback Church conference. And so at the time we went to it, we had all kinds of conflict going on at our parish. I mean, as a result of changes from going to Saddleback and now implementing some things we had learned about small groups, about preaching,
yes,
about hospitality and music, and taking some of those lessons, there became a tension happening. And some people were complaining about us to the diocese, and there's other stories there. But in the midst of that, we had signed up to go to North Point's Drive Conference. And again, God just ordained some things, like from the very beginning to the very end. The beginning session, Andy Stanley brings out a ladder with no rungs on the lower level. Like there's only a couple rungs at the top. And he says, for many people, this is the church. They want to get to God, but there's no lower rungs. And they're like, well, to the church, do you have any lower rungs for me? And he's like, most places are like, no, we don't. But he said, you are here because you want to put lower rungs on the ladder for people to get to God. And some of you've gotten fired for that. And it was like, oh my gosh, we thought that might be happening to us. It was like, it hit us between the eyes, right? You guys believe in that so much. And then, again, going through a very difficult time, Charles Stanley told a story about Andy's father, about when he was basically fired from the church and how he handled it, and how he just said, God, you put me here, and God, you'll take me out. And that gave us the fortitude going through that conflict. We're like, okay, God put us here. And then the final session, Andy Stanley did a whole thing on teamwork. And then he had four kind of major points about how to build a team. Then he's like, all right, put away your notebooks. Maybe from the context of eternity, we're on the same team, because we acknowledge the problem. The problem is that people think the church has nothing to offer, but we're going to solve it. The problem is that the church has become so irrelevant to people's day-to-day lives, but we're going to solve it. And what's needed is leadership. And then he goes on to tell a story. He's like, I sound like I'm making this up, but last night a kid in our church died. He said, a 16-year-old kid named Parker. He's like, he says to the pastor, he's like, you guys have been there. There's crying, there's just upset, there's all this emotion, of course. But the father pulls him aside and says, Andy, I want to thank you for our church. Because of our church, I know where my son is. I know my son's in heaven, and I'll see him again someday. And then Andy Stanley turns to these pastors, church people, and just says, is there another organization in the world that can give that kind of consolation to a father who's just lost his son? Do you think what you do matters? And then I was like, I'm in. I'm like, I will give the rest of my life to making sure that people see that the local parish is the hope of the world, and that the church, making the church relevant for people. So, I said that's like, to me, when I'm having a hard, we were talking a little bit, and it's so hard, it's challenging, and the challenges we have. But when I'm having a hard day, I go back to that. I'm like, nope, I'll replay that message sometimes, and I'll like tear up. I'm like, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing it. So that's why, believe in conferences, that they really can change our lives and really give us, we say we want to do three things: inspire, encourage, equip, right? Inspire people. Again, that's what happened at Saddleback. Here's what's possible. There's so much more. We serve a God who can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Encourage, because again, as we're talking before we got on this, ministry beats us down. It's just, life is tough. And then, so we need to be encouraged. And hopefully if we're going to a good conference, we're going to walk out like, I don't care. I'm going to do it. I don't care what it takes. And then hopefully equipped, like we've learned, obviously we need to learn some things that are make us more effective in our ministry. So
yes, that's awesome, because it is hard. And what you just did there, it's so helpful, because you recalled your why. And when you recall that why, that story and what that did in you, it's like, get out of the way. Like you can lift cars off people. It's like all of a sudden it's like, I will not quit. And that
Yeah.
makes the craziness of the day to day, it puts it in the proper perspective. And I think
Yeah.
so
It's
many
like,
of us,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, you need that why behind the what, and if you keep that why, you can keep going. And
Yeah,
hopefully that's what conferences do. They remind you of that, and other ways
yeah,
get reminded. But yeah, you need
yeah.
the why. When you get focused on the
Mm,
struggles, it can be very easy to want to quit. When you say, no, I'm doing this for this larger purpose, then keep going.
yeah. For me, one of the things for me, Tom, was years ago, I was asked to be the sponsor of my friend's uh, teenager who was getting confirmed. And I didn't, we didn't really talk a lot, me and this young fella, but he looked up to me apparently and asked if I'd be his sponsor. So in one sense, I'm honored, but I just sponsored another little fella, and I'm sure he wasn't coming to church like the year before. And then I sponsored this guy, went out of my way to try to do the things that they asked us to do in terms of confirmation prep and all that other stuff. And I'll never forget his father coming to me and saying, Ron, and he was more Catholic than the Pope, for heaven's sakes. Any of the popes, just for and if for those that feel weird about that. So,
Yeah, I
but
got you.
um, and I was mortified because I loved him and his family. And he said, Ron, I'm leaving because there's nothing for my kids. And I've tried to get involved, but the priest doesn't want to do anything. And he used to do ministry when he didn't even have kids. And when they were young and couldn't come, he still contributed. But then when his family was there and going through a hard time, there was nothing for his kids, and that particular
Mm,
priest wasn't interested. And he felt like, I only have one chance to raise my kids, and they're at risk of losing their faith. And I'm not going to become Baptist, but there was a Baptist church that was really on fire and seemed to do a really good job of family ministry and children's ministry and youth ministry. And it just mortified him to go. But he felt like he had to go. And I was just so mad. Like I thought, why do I belong to a church? It's almost like this is what we do. If you don't like it, tough luck. And it's like, I just felt like this lack of care because I've watched my friends peel away from the church forever.
mm.
And that was the last straw. I just cried and cried and cried. And I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make a difference. And I didn't know what that would look like. In fact, I also cried at different times, Lord, take this passion away from me. Like, why do I care about the church? It doesn't feel like any of my friends do. Why do I care?
Yeah,
Like, I'd be the least likely person to care if you tracked my upbringing in terms of my own choices. My mother was an Irish Catholic who made sure we got to church, but internally I was rebellious and easily bored and so yeah, and so that's the why, and that's the piece that just makes, and that's where you and I first met at Parish Catalyst. Bill Syme got people together from all over the US, mostly we're the church from Canada, and just to try to encourage one another, to try to be an encouragement. And for Father James and I, meeting you and Father Michael was just a breath of fresh air. I thought, oh, good. These guys, it was just really fun to be able to commiserate, but really encourage and to share stories.
yeah. You need to, and hopefully that's the other thing that can happen with conferences. Excuse me. Is that you find other people that share the same passion and care about it. It's people who are on the same wavelength as you. So we
Yeah,
do need that for sure.
we do. And so tell me a little bit about like what made you guys decide to start a conference, and I know post COVID, you guys are jumping back in. I know COVID killed us all. We had to kill our conference, DR 2020. So we were so excited about it, and we canceled it. And I hated the thought of canceling it. But then a few months later, it was the best decision we could have made.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
so
I mean, I think
hard.
the reason to do conferences is that, is you want to give to others what's been given to you. It's the same thing. I
Yeah,
know, again, the power and the change that it had on my life And then the opportunity then when you could go to a conference and bring some other people. Because then one of the hard things is you can go to a conference, and early on, Father Michael and I would just go us. And that was good because at least you had one other person who got it, right? And who understood it. But then you got to try to bring that back to your team. And the team's like, they just weren't there. They didn't have the same experience. And hopefully you can get it. So I think hopefully it's good to bring a team. But yeah, so the reason, we do our conferences, we want to pass on to others what was given to us. And we know the change it made in us. And hopefully, we know how much. And, I think when you're trying to change things too, it's like going to those conferences like water in the desert, right? When early on, especially when we're trying to change, we would, we would look forward to that next conference. We would look forward to going to Saddleback. We would look forward to getting the North Point Drive conference. And just like our souls needed it, and to get refreshed and renewed and have time again, just to somewhat to be learning, but somewhat just to be there and drink it in, to know a place that was moving, with the Holy Spirit, and being in a place where you could feel the culture cared and wanted to change things. A church that's not yours, first of all, you can step in, right? It's just like, it's like going to a vacation home. Like, okay, I don't have to worry about like the paint that needs to be repainted or these other problems that are around. I'm just in someone else's church. So, stepping into that, and then, so we want to produce that for other people as well. And then again, just some time to sing and worship and praise God. And again, you can just get filled up during those times. So, again, I know for us, like, especially during the challenging times, getting to the next conference was just huge for our souls.
Yeah. Yeah, we felt the same way. And if you're not going anywhere, I don't think you need a conference. Like, if you're perfectly content managing decline, then by all means, don't go to a conference. Like, you really don't need to save money.
Yeah, it's a good point. Right.
Put it in your parking lot, put it in the new lawn mowing contract or something. But if you're going somewhere, you're going to need to get and stay inspired, because, man, life kicks the pants out of you. And sharing vision, like to your point, bringing other people with you is critical, because we need vision carriers. And so I remember we went to a conference one time, and we had a deacon with us who really sometimes could be the voice of the most frustrated people in our church. They seem to go to him because he'd been there the longest. And so he'd hear all these complaints of why we shouldn't do this and why we shouldn't do that, and don't go here, don't go there. And he'd always bring those concerns to our meetings. It was so frustrating. And so we brought him and boy, he wasn't there a half a day. And his whole conversation was, we have to lean into this. This is so amazing. Like, he could just see, kind of like what you were saying with the parking lot or the building you thought was the church. It was just for youth ministry. Like, you're on another planet. And sometimes we need to get on another planet of what's possible, because these churches started somewhere too. And if they can do it, we can do it, unless Jesus really isn't in the Eucharist. Like, that's what I don't get about our faith. Like, we have this richness of faith, and we say it's so amazing, but yet that becomes the very excuse why we stink. And it's like, really? Like, that's not how I see it. Like, I think we're supercharged. And so if anybody else can do something, we can do it. We just have to figure it out, because we have the same Holy Spirit, the same God, the same sacraments. And so come on. And so,
it's interesting when sometimes people look at nativity and like it can't be reproduced and can't be replicated. And we're not trying to exact copies, but why can't it be? What is if God is a God of miracles and God's hands on things, like you said, same Holy Spirit God doesn't like just do one thing and move on. He does it over and over again. Other thing I wanted to say is true. I think you were kind of pointing to is the need to, if you want to move, you got to move, right? Like you're saying, right. If you're just happy with status quo, you're right. But going to a conference, getting on an airplane or driving a road trip, whatever. That's, why do we do pilgrimages? In some ways, it's because it's to remind us our life is a pilgrimage, and it's a journey. It's a spiritual journey, and we got to move. And you can do a pilgrimage to Jerusalem or Rome or, any of these, a shrine or any of these things. But when you do it, in some ways it is like a pilgrimage to go to a conference, especially to go see another church. that's doing things well, because you're going to say, okay, it's going to put me on a journey. It's going to put me on a path.
Yeah.
I think also too, if you go somewhere and you're outside your comfort zone, it's really good. So I think uh, people just want to go where they're comfortable, and that's part of it. I got more comfortable over time, but it was very uncomfortable for me, again, stepping the saddleback. But that's how I grew. I was being challenged, I was being challenged um, by some of the things they were saying, and of course, didn't accept all of it. Their sacrament, but their view of the sacraments. But I accept, I grew a lot personally. I grew, again, my own leadership capacity. I grew in my own faith. I grew to until I'd gone to Saddleback. I love music, and I never connected music to my faith, because the music I heard in church was pretty crappy, honestly. And then I heard music that was great and kind of closer in line with what I like to listen to. And I got exposed more to Scripture and realized, I need to love the Word of God more, and that personal relationship with Jesus. Like, all these things outside of my comfort zone forced me to grow. And so hopefully, if you're going to a conference, it should stretch you a bit. And if it's not, growth is always outside your comfort zone. So again, that's the other thing about conferences. Maybe they're a little uncomfortable, go somewhere, but that's where the growth is.
One of the things I appreciate, because you guys were ahead of us in terms of renewal, that's for sure. Like, we read your book before Divine Renovation was ever written. And so we were really excited and inspired by you guys and your courage. And we too started going to conferences, and they weren't Catholic, because there weren't Catholics doing conferences. And so we had to be open to go to places that were doing church well and learn from them, and then take that and put that into the context of our Catholic faith. And then, Patrick Lencioni launches Amazing Parish, and you guys would be there, and Father James would be there. And I always enjoyed, that was my favorite part of those conferences, when we actually had parishes up there. You two guys were the people leading parishes. And that was such a robust conversation, because everything else was parish ideas, but St. Benedict and Nativity were actually doing parish renewal.
Yeah, I
And
mean, that's my, that would be my vision for one day. I hope there's 15, 20 other parishes doing conferences,
right,
that across the country, that are appealing to people, because it is that fresh. I went to the National Eucharistic Conference, and definitely some great stuff, but I'm like, where's the parish in this? I mean, we got to be leading the way. So, I do think that's one of the things about our conferences. It will be all parish stuff. I mean, our breakouts are how to lead in a parish. It's not.
Yes.
And so, and again, that's where I want to be leading. And I think we need other parishes to step forward and say, yeah, we're gonna lead the way in the renewal of the church, because that's where it's going to happen. I mean, again, I think it was kind of funny at the Eucharistic Congress. It's like all this stuff about the Eucharist and the beauty of it. Of course it is, but where do people experience it? At their parish. So the parish needs to show the beauty of it. The parish needs to be a place that draws people into it.
Amen. And it's funny, because we were there, and I was asking people every time I was standing in line for food or what have you, or at the booths, I would just ask people, hey, tell me about your parish. And then I'd ask them, hey, does your parish doing anything for evangelization? And they're like, evangelization? No. And so all except one parish is doing anything. So then I went over to the UCCB booth on evangelization. I thought, oh, this is going to be awesome. Like, I'm Canadian. These are Americans. These guys get this stuff. And so I went up to them and said, hey, loved it. Find out what are you guys seeing in terms of evangelization nationally that you're getting really excited about? And the guy said, well, I think the size of the lines behind the processions is quite a witness. And I'm like, you think that's evangelization? Like, what? Like, what? And so, it's wild to me how we're missing, like you say, the renewal of parishes, and I would even suggest the whole idea of evangelization as a concept in our churches that are less relevant than they've been in a long time. But I think we're in a resurgence, and that's why I'm glad you guys are taking a big splash back into the conference after COVID, because I think the time is actually really right. I think there is a hunger. I think we've gone just about as far as we're comfortable with on the craziness of life. And just throwing God out the window, science out the window, throwing everything out the window, and saying everything
Yeah.
goes. Like, I think people are getting tired of that. I actually think young people are hungrier than they've ever been in their in history, for truth and what God has to say about their life. And so I think your conference has never been more relevant. What do you feel in terms, like, why are you guys diving in now, back in now in a big way into your conference? Because you guys, it was cooking before COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first of all, when COVID hit, we were the same thing as you guys. We were planning to do a conference in April, May 2020. And it's funny, I never had a great feeling about it for whatever reason. I never did. And I don't know if I knew COVID was coming. But and then I don't know. I talked to Lisa Brannickmeyer one time, and she said we are going to be slow to bring back events, and that just hit me. I'm like, yeah, I don't know when COVID's going to be over. I don't, it's such a weird, crazy time. But I felt the same thing, and so just felt like I'm not going to push it. We're trying to sort out in the parish what's going on and how to figure out how to bring people back. And for us, I think there was a time, 2020 was it, 2021, 2021, we had Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve was sort of a bellwether for where we were. 2021, Christmas Eve, very light. And then Christmas Eve 2022, we do our Christmas Eve Mass at the fairgrounds, Timonium Fairgrounds, about a mile away. It was a big thing for us, but we obviously didn't do it COVID year, and we didn't do it the following year. And we went back and forth about whether to do it the following year, and we studied at Nativity, and it was packed 2020 Christmas Eve. And so we had to go back to the fairgrounds last year, 2023. So I think in some ways that was to me like, okay, we are now in a different place and people are willing to gather and come back. And so then it just takes time to build, to do a conference. We did a very little mini conference for what are our partner parishes. We have 27 partner parishes, and we invited them in to do it. And it was just kind of a fun celebration to bring them together, all these people who knew each other on Zoom but never been together. And we gave out like awards and these little plaques, and we tried to have it, be a fun day. And so after that, we're like, all right, we got to come back. And so now that's why we're coming back with this conference. And, it's just a lot of fun. It's exhausting. It's draining. But it's like the best kind of exhausting draining there is. It's like at the end, you just, to have been around all these church leaders and to have poured into them for a couple of days, it's, there really isn't anything like it. So it's just a really privilege and honor to do it.
Good for you. It's there's more and more DR really never did get back into the swing of having those conferences at St. Benedict, which always broke my heart because it was so fun to do. They had one in Texas, but one in the UK, I think, but not necessarily as consistent, and certainly not parish-based like they used to be. And so there is something to be said about going to a place that actually does what they say they do. And so what do you think people will get out of that conference? And so if I'm sitting somewhere thinking, conference, yeah, you're right, I should go to a conference, but what can we expect? Like what would our staff or key leaders, what would they experience in terms of content? What are your thoughts?
As far as, well, and I was going to say, start with the experience is, first of all, I hope you're going to kind of step in and be like, again, our church it's not quite Saddleback for sure. It's nowhere near that. But I think you do step into our environment like, okay, this is pretty cool. Hopefully, I mean, in some ways overwhelming, but in a good way. I hope, you're going to get overwhelmed by just hospitality and welcome. And then the music, hopefully the messages are going to move your heart and inspire you. Hope you're just going to have fun. It's going to be a good time. You're going to laugh. Hopefully, I like, what you say about your podcast, laugh out loud, grit your teeth, all those kind of things. And then content, we'll have content for no matter where you are serving in the parish. So if you're in leadership or the pastor, we'll have some Q&As just with priests and some things on preaching and teaching. Also just on leadership and just, how to build a healthy staff culture, how to build up volunteer leaders in your church, from volunteerism, how to grow a healthy volunteer ministry, to small groups if you want to get that started in your church, kids and student ministry. So if you're serving the next generation, we'll have breakouts all along those things. Children's liturgy of the word. So pretty much everybody, we try to hit money, which is a big topic I like to talk about how to raise money in your church. So no matter who you are in the church, we have a topic that's going to, breakouts that are going to help you. That's the equip part, especially, right? We hope the main sessions are inspired, encouraging you, but the breakouts equip you. Sorry.
Love it. Who's going to be giving those talks?
So Father Michael and I right now, we're talking to maybe a couple of other people. Bishop Parker, who's on our board here at
What about the breakouts, the practical ones?
Oh, the breakouts. Yes. That will be our nativity staff as well as partner parishes. So we have those 27 partner parishes. So we know sometimes nativity, we can talk about how we built stuff up, but we could be a little bit further along. But then there's also parishes that'll be exactly right where parishes coming are. So if you're, so try to give the kind of, try to do basics up to people who are further along. So it'll be nativity staff and parish staff from our partner parishes. So people who are working in the trenches, just like you are.
And I want to highlight that because there are conferences that you can go where you get all the Catholic speakers that write the books and have podcasts or whatever else. And isn't it fun to see them and stuff? And that's lovely. But what I love about what you're doing, Tom, is people will be hearing from the people who actually do it. And that is really important versus the who's who of Catholic speaking. That's fun too, but it's not going to give you what you need to turn your church around. And this conference is exactly the type of conference that when we did ours too, it was so important to me that like the staff, I remember the first time we ran our conference, we're giving all the talks, but here's the thing. It's got to be the best workshops imaginable. And so we did all this work with our staff to get them ready. And then we watched them together and gave feedback so that and then it was just the people who do it, who gave the talks. And for us, it was like people left saying, well, no offense, but if you can do it, we can do it. It's like, sure. Right? That's the point. But when we go to these who's who of Catholic speakers and they get up there and do what they do with, it's like, that was awesome, but I couldn't do that, or I'm not that person. But when you go to a conference like this, where it's actually the staff and the key leaders that are putting on the workshops, that's a horse of a different color. Like, that's where you need to bring your team if you're going to get your church cooking. And so I just want to say, thank you for doing that. Like, there's enough of those who's who out there. We need churches putting on conferences that the church staff and key leaders are actually the ones telling you what they're doing and how they've messed up and the mistakes they've made and how they've learned and grown, because it's more accessible that way, I find.
Yeah, there's certainly a place for podcasters and people who are broadcasting those things. That's a service to help people grow spiritually. But at the end of the day, people need a church community. And that's why the people, those of you who are serving in a parish and are grinding it out in whatever, from preaching to working kids and student ministry to building up small groups to working with volunteers. That's where community is created. It can't be created on a podcast. It can't be created. So again, obviously big fan of podcasts. Listen to yours, Ron, and have to be on yours. Listen to my share of podcasts. But at the end of the day, we need to be grinding out in the church, parish churches.
No. Well, it's the only reason I do this podcast is to inspire people to do the very things that you guys are doing. We have a church that I've been in partnership with for quite some time, St. John the Evangelist, and Father Samuel led in his team. And they've just put on their second annual conference. And it's a one-day at some point. I hope they move to a 2-day. I'm not sure. But it's the same idea. It's really the local people giving. And it just really excites me. I know John Ricardo now is doing Acts 29, and he's out there trying to make a difference and doing his thing. And so there are more and more Catholic churches, and not that I know John Ricardo's doing more stuff around servicing them more than running a church now, but there's more and more people, I think, that will get to that place of intentional generosity. Like when we get into parish renewal and we start to get some success, and then we work through that season, we call it the danger zone, which is where things start to fall apart and people start to push back and say, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel comfortable anymore. Is this still my church? And then you're having to decide, are we going to continue to lean in to break through, or are we going to go back and to what we were before? But once you get through that season, which in many ways is the Paschal mystery, it's the death and resurrection.
To me, it sounds like moving out of Egypt into the desert. Are you going to go to the promised land, or are you going to stay there?
At least back there we had 3 square meals and a place to get buried. They wanted slavery at some point, but he said, no, we're going to keep going where God's calling us, and he trusted. And so, but then I think when you break through that side and things become normal, you start to develop a culture of a healthy culture. You start to get your preaching right, your hospitality right, your worship experience right. All of a sudden that becomes like, well, isn't every church like this? And we kind of smile, those of us that have gone through that transition phase. It's like, no, this was hard. But then we get to a place, hopefully, of intentional generosity where we're trying to help others. And again, we were helped by you. You were part of the inspiration for us. And our whole parish, we bought like 800 of your books and got a bunch of people to read them and together. And because we wanted people to start thinking about what's possible. And so what has putting on the conferences done for your church, like actually hosting them? Like, what's that looked like? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we love it. It's been a long time now, since it's been 7 years, but when we were doing it, kind of every other year basis, first of all, you could see the pride in our parishioners to be hosting it, especially the volunteer ministers. People would take off from work to be, here all day long to help with it. For the staff, most staff, sometimes it does create a little bit of like, you have to bring them in and explain why you're doing it, because it can be extra work. But overall, they would be, again, the day after, pretty proud to have hosted that and excited to see. And I think to see the impact you're having beyond just your parish. So overall for the parish, I think it just becomes a source of pride, in a good way, and a source of encouragement to them. Look, it's not just about us. We are having impact. And really, at the end of the day, any healthy parish, it's not going to be just about the people in the pews. It's going to be a group of people that want to change the world, whether that's impacting the community around it, impacting the larger church, in missions, and helping in that way. So any healthy church is going to be glad, to be serving out. It's like that whole Dead Sea, right? The whole Dead Sea, whereas it's just flowing in and nothing's flowing out, so it's dead, right? So any healthy living organism is going to be flowing out as well.
Love it. So it has really impacted the people, because that sense of pride, that's what I watched in our church too. They didn't know if they could do it, and when they did it, they just were so happy to have been happy to have had the chance to host other people and to share what we're learning. And so here's what I would say to all of our listeners today: as you're listening to this, let's get behind this conference. Let's go to Rebuilt. I think it's June 2nd and 3rd, isn't it? And so get there the day early and take in Mass. And then as part of that, because if we don't get behind Catholic conferences, we're not going to have any. We'll just have to keep going to these Protestant conferences. And thank goodness for Protestants who are kicking butt and taking names. Like, good on them. Like, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for hosting us and allowing us to be a part of what you're doing and learn. But this very thing is inspiring Catholics. And so Catholics need to get behind Catholics so that we can continue to inspire others and help others be great. And so we talked ahead of time that we're going to put a code in the link below, because the early bird rate is probably going to be gone by the time this gets up. And so we're going to see about getting you the early bird special with a code for a certain period of time. Does that sound like what we talked about,
Yeah,
Tom.
I just said yes, and my team will probably be mad at me, Ron. But yeah, let's just do it, and we'll figure it out. So
We're gonna figure it out. So
it's going to be a
click below.
scale, hopefully 1 to 5. I don't know, like 5 might be they'll really be mad at me. 1 they'll be like it's no big deal. So I think it's not too hard. So anyway, we just talked that up. But yeah, what do you want the code to be? Ron? Let's call it Ron. Just Ron. Make it easy.
We'll call it Ron 2024. I don't know,
So,
but
yeah.
we'll put it. We'll put the link in the notes below so that people get a chance to do that. But I really do want to encourage you.
Yeah,
Conferences
it'll
have
be
changed
just
my
to
life.
give some dates to that again. It's going to be June 2nd and 3rd are the 2 dates of the conference. But as you said, you can come in June 1st. We're going to have, you can come to Mass. We'll have open registration. You can kind of come and we're going to do some things where you can just connect with our staff if you want to come in with questions. So, but June 2nd and 3rd are the 2 major days of the conference. So 2025. Yeah. Love to have you there.
Wouldn't that be fun? So that's great. So again, thank you to all of you that have been listening. Rally the troops. Get a bunch of people. Take a bunch of key leaders and parishioners with you and get your butt over there. It's an amazing church. It's an amazing community. And we do need to keep our buckets filled when it comes to parish renewal, because the whirlwind of ministry has a way of knocking the good out of us sometimes. And we need to fill that back up again. And so, Tom, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Ron. Always good to see you.
You as well. And for all of you that are working hard in the trenches, keep up the good work. It matters. What you do matters, as Tom said earlier. Is there any other organization that can give the hope that we give? And the answer is no. So work hard, and we will see you next time.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.